Hi everybody, Michael Fisk, April 15th, 2022, the weekend before Easter, Good Friday here. I apologize, I am working from home today and there's some landscaping going on outside my window, so apologize if that noise is annoying to you. If you can't hear me, just let me know and I'll be sure to talk louder. Martha Barnes, hi, how are you? We'll just wait a couple of seconds here as people get logged on. As you know, as you're getting logged on, think of any questions, comments, things you want to talk about. I don't know how many of you were able to join the town hall that we had an hour ago with John, Russ, and Vonda. But I apologize. Technical issues. We tried to record it so we can share it, and it did not get recorded with the platform that we're using. So I'll try to recap, a bit what they talked about, on here. But as people are getting logged on, again, the safety message. Please, if you're driving, don't watch this. I mean, it will be recorded and saved on YouTube and Facebook here for a couple of days. Martha, you're on vacation. Awesome. Where are you? Well, let us know where you are. Hi, Tracy. To you. We'll just give it another 15, 20 seconds here. As people get on here. Um, Again, if you can't hear me, let me know. There's some landscaping going on, outside my window here. So. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Last week, we did a town hall with owner operators. Earlier today, about an hour ago, we did a town hall with company drivers. I apologize, they were not recorded as we hoped they would be, but we're also trying to figure out how to maybe use Facebook or another platform, that we can do video sharing, where you can see us and we can see you, but haven't figured out all of that yet. There's some limitations with various platforms. If Facebook is what we use here, but not all of our drivers have access to Facebook. For example, so sometimes it's better than others, though. Martha, you're headed to Louisiana to pick up Tim's load of boat. That's awesome. I'm a big boating fan. So, Elizabeth, hi from North Dakota. So the big things that we were talking about during these town halls, is the state of the economy. Tri-State is really well positioned. The diversity that we have, from our military freight, with our commercial freight, arms, ammunition, explosives, our has waste, protects us, in many ways. And I'm sure you guys are seeing the inflation issues. Certainly at the fuel pump, groceries. I don't know that shortages is a big thing. I know that there's been talk about various food shortages, and stuff. And what's interesting is certainly interest rates on home loans and that kind of stuff is going up, pretty rapidly. Obviously, rents, apartment and housing rents and housing prices, has gone up, but the way that with the supply chain issues that we had a year ago, and in the economic terms they call it the bullwhip effect. There's probably an expectation that there could be some over stock going on, so those kind of pricings may stay pretty reasonable, type of thing. But things, kind of go cyclical, and there's a ripple effect, that as it goes through various things. But we're very cognizant of what's going out there, price wise and inflation. We kind of knew that these things were happening, and so that's where if you recall last year for company drivers, we had a pay increase in July, and then looking at the economic indicators and everything, we had another increase in October. Our owner operators are doing really well. I mean, it's as our customers are paying us more than the owner operators get a direct, percentage of that. But we're able to raise the pay and everything for our company drivers as well, and all of you deserve it. I mean, it's John talked about earlier in the town hall that one of his big goals is to get everybody, all truck drivers, over the road truck drivers, over $100,000 a year. And we're going to get remarkably close to that for team drivers. I mean, solo drivers is going to be hard, for you to get, to that point right now. But we're still working on that as well. But certainly our team drivers, should be looking at that. We'll have a record amount of drivers, over 100,000. Many of you guys are already seeing it in your annual bonuses. Looking at it here in March, for example, one of our, long-standing teams, got over $23,000, combined. I mean, it's, I know for the month of April, we're looking at almost a $13,000, annual bonus for one driver, and all of those things, is really fun to see and it's spectacular and we're grateful to be able to do it. We're grateful that you guys are willing to go out there, and do it. Martha just talked about how she's, they're taking some vacation time and apparently she and Tim have a boat. I think that's awesome. I mean, it's, and we try to, to set up our home time, policies where instead of you're just getting 36-hour reset, so many companies brag about, well, we get our drivers home every weekend. And listen, I mean, trucking, it's hard to have money and home time, and we recognize that. But we've set up our home time where instead of you're just getting a quick, dine and dash at home, type of thing, if you're home every weekend, you're getting basically a week's vacation every month, type of thing. But you earn it. I mean, it's and we're grateful for the work that you do, and I love to hear, again, Martha and Tim taking their boat out in Louisiana. That's awesome, but if you're on a 36-hour reset, you probably don't have time to take the boat out, type of thing. But anyway, let me say hi to some others. Gene, hi from Detroit. Richard Worley, hi from Brandon, Florida. Daniel McCarthy. Tracy, I know that you're recovering from some health, there, and wish you the best, in your challenges there. Nancy Davis Carlo, hi from Kentucky. I think you guys are moving to the Drum Fleet, Atco Fleet, as I understand. Speaking of, and David Dyer, hi. Speaking of, for those company drivers with their clearance, if you're interested in the Drum Fleet that is relocated to Richmond, Kentucky, especially if you live in that area, we can essentially get you home on weekends. The Drum Fleet can anyway. So if that's something that's of interest to you, please get a hold of me or Jeanette Denton, and we can get you more information, on that. There are some opportunities, to expand that fleet, by a few trucks as well. So just let us know if that's something that you're interested in. So anyway, it's inflation is here. We're seeing a lot of those pressures. I think we've done a pretty good job of preparing for it, anticipating it. I mean, working with our customers. The fuel, costs, and Russ talked about, trailers have gone up, almost $20,000. Some 40% increase in trailers. So it's not just, personal expenditures, that's feeling the inflation. We feel it as a company, and fortunately we have really good customers who are also seeing that and feeling that, and they work with us. They understand the cost of fuel and trucks and equipment and parts, is dramatically backed up, and so all of those things are real issues, and you guys are going through it, we're going through it, but we're pretty well positioned. I mean, it's, as things potentially get tougher in the next 6, 12, 18 months, we're certainly prepared for that. and we'll continue to communicate with you guys what we're seeing. Owner operators, we can just kind of predict, as the economy, struggles, a bit, then it's going to affect your revenues. Our company drivers are fairly insulated, from the economic up and downs, and I know that our owner operators and share with the company drivers, the kind of revenues they're making, and God bless you, when times are well and things have been really well for the last 3 years, it's our owner operators have done really well, but if the tough times economically are coming, as many of the experts and professionals and everything are expecting. Our company drivers are weather that much better, and it tends to be more protected there. So anyway, Develine and Martha. Cooking stuff in Richmond, washer dryer. We're working on that. If you've been to Richmond, you'll notice that there's been a lot of activity. There we've had to beef up, some various things, in order to get it, properly, set up, for the drum fleets. But those things are in the process, of that there in Richmond as well. So it's not going to be, the same high, country club type feel, as the Joplin, main lodge, but yeah, there are going to be, some improvements there for sure. So, anyway, it's just wanted to kind of share that with you. It's and I also wanted to share some of the things that Vonda, talked about. Listen, Tri-State has done really well, the last few years, and again, our drivers have seen that. I mean, company wages, have gone up, 10-15%, in the last 12 months. Our owner operators, have seen, big increases. And I know that there's also frustration. It's not all about money, right? I mean, it's we talk about the three most important things for drivers is money. I mean, we work for money, all of us, home time, and then culture and respect. And I know there's frustrations, at times when you lose a pre-plan or things are changed around and all of that, and you got to understand that there's a reason why we do that, and the work that Kyle and the planners and Stern on the West Coast and Vonda and the rest of the the CSRs and the driver managers, we don't do it as a whim. We do it because typically because our customers, need it, because, certain, needs with drivers, type of thing. And we understand that individually it's frustrating for you at times and it impacts you, but the work that Vonda and operations does is what allows us to stay healthy and create the revenue and to create, the environment, which allows us to, pay for the higher fuel and driver wage increases, and all of those kind of things. So, bear with us. I mean, it's, if we were just as standard FAK, those kind of things don't change, very much. But the world that we're in, we're very niche. We are very selective, and and those things do change, more often than we'd like it to see it change. But the adjustments that we make, are to the benefit of the company. And again, I understand that, that it does create, some irritation and frustration, for each of you at times, when your pre-plans get changed. But those are reasons why we do it. Vonda and her team is committed to try to communicate, those things, better, more effectively. But sometimes. Sometimes we're able to come to a meeting of the minds, and sometimes we can't. So, Joe Younger, hi to you. I really don't have much else to share, right now. You guys know me. I'll keep rattling on if there's something to talk about. But if you have something you want to comment or question on, I'll kind of kill a couple of seconds here. Send it in now. But in the meantime, I want to wish everybody happy Easter. Again, just grateful for you. The next 6 to 12 months, let's just see how things are. But we're really, feeling good about the way, Tri-State, historically has been able to weather tough times, and it is strategic. I mean, it's not by accident. So, but everything changes, dramatically. And so, we'll keep our eye on the ball as well. So, everyone, thank you so much, and have a great weekend. Appreciate you.